Okay, so we should be familiar with downloading Kali Linux. Make sure we extract it with 7-zip, right? So I had my old download. If you still have that, you can use it or you can download the current one. So I'm using the 26.1 and then show more options, 7-zip, extract files. Then once you have the extracted folder, you can go in and double click it, but I'm going to just run VirtualBox. So make sure we add like the virtualization tools. Like you can have a category, you can put in the virtualization, you can put like, you know, VirtualBox, Kali Linux Virtual VM, right? If you're using Windows VM, you can put the versions on there so they know that you know how. If you use VMware, I've used VMware many, many years, professionally and also when I was teaching similarly, right? The only downside with VMware is that if you run the desktop version, you can only have the trial period. I think they do have a VMware player that's a free version, but similar process. I like VirtualBox because it's completely free. All right. So in here, I'm just gonna change my settings to give myself a little bit more RAM. It's not required, but recommended, right? And then processor, you can add a couple more core to it. And then I can launch. Click start. Once it boots, we'll just log in. Remember that you need to select your Ethernet adapter because the virtual machine only sees Ethernet, even if you're using a laptop or wireless adapter, right? Unless you add the adapter, then you can select it in the virtual machine itself. So as default, we are going to select the Ethernet adapter, which is ETH0. We're gonna capture it for a few minutes. You don't have to wait the entire 5 minutes. You can just let it go for a few minutes, but you need to generate traffic and capture. So refresh the website a couple of times so it captures because there is a lag with the application. Then we are going to look at the conversations and the packet information, right? For analysis purposes. It's not like the full-blown uh lab like what you've seen in a networking class, but I want to kind of review on how to use your protocol analysis app. So I'm going to log in now, and if you need help, let me know. Okay, so once we're on Kali Linux desktop, we'll just open up our terminal as usual. And but what we're gonna do is you can run the Wireshark on itself by itself. But I'm gonna go ahead and open up Firefox browser. And then I'm gonna go look for HTTP websites. And you can use like HTTP forever, right? Or any kind of link. So I'm just gonna go with the first result here. So once I have that open, I'm gonna go ahead and click on the dragon and you can just search for Wireshark. It's going to default to your Ethernet option here. We are going to select that. So make sure it's highlighted and then click the fin. Now, remember that I opened the website before I started the Wireshark, so you want to be able to click refresh or reconnect to the website again, right? Do that a couple of times to capture the traffic. we want to let it run for a couple minutes to kind of listen in on all the network traffic. When you're done, you can click the red button to stop it. The reason why I'm using HTTP is that I want to look for port 80 connection, right? Not secure. So once you have your capture that you want to analyze, you can click the red button to stop, right? That should be plenty now. So let it go for a couple minutes. So I'm here at step 7. Now we're gonna go to the statistic. So click on statistics. So if you run this on Windows or Linux, it's the same UI, right? But your graphical user interface is the same. What we're gonna do is we are going to select conversation so you can look at who's talking and who's listening and then back and forth communication. And then in the conversation option, you can select it and it's going to give you the communication system. So take a screenshot here after you click conversations. And it gives you the summary of the total packets that is being sent from a certain address to a certain address, right? So how do I know how many conversations that is taking place, right? Basically, you would see the analytical data here. How many packets were sent from address A? How many was sent back from address B, the response? So your address A, right? And your address B. Now, if you want to look at the specific type of protocol, you can click the different tabs. So if I go here, then it's going to tell me this one, right? Specifically for the IPv4, and it gives you the total at the top of the tab. And this is the my virtual machine IP address, right? 10.0.2.15. And there is external IP address that because I'm using the web servers. And then if you scroll right, you can see more details, right? The packet, how many packets on an individual conversation, the size, your byte size, the duration. That's what I asked before right here. What is the duration of the conversation? And this is varied, right? From system to system, but the point is to show you where you can obtain the information for analysis purposes, the bits from A to B. So my system to the external systems, right? And you have many conversations in a larger network environment. This is just looking at our virtual machine communicating with its server, right? The web server. So as you look at the IPv4 tab, look at the first entry, you would see what is the system A IP address. So because IPv4 is going to give you the version 4 address, so sometimes they have version 6, right? So you would have the address A here and the address B, and yours might be different than mine. And if you look at the first entry, I have 8 packets. It counts the 8 here. Whereas if you look at the later entry, right, that could be varied. So that's higher in number. There's also more, right, depending on the type of services that's running the connection. Then we're gonna go to copy. Bye. Take care. Good night. Good night. And this is where you can select your file, right? If you look at ELK in the later part, I put a link for you to look at the actual documentation. ELK works very well with YAML or YAML format, also with JSON. But you do have a lot of analytical applications that work with CSV, which is similar to what you see with comma separated, right? With Excel, right? But it looks similar to that. However, it will give you a way to format your columns and rows and filter, but you can select the option of file type that you want. So in this case, we're going to use JSON. Okay. And we want to copy the information that we selected and then having that into a JSON file. JSON works well with like web-based type of analytics integration, but there are applications that work with just JSON itself, right? So we can close the window and then we would look at the statistic for the ports. So now come back to statistic, and I'm here at step 14. We're gonna go to IPv4 statistic again, and we can look at the port and destination. So under that, you're gonna go to the right. You're gonna select IPv4 statistic. Click it. And then I think you have to scroll right a little more, sorry. Oh. Or go to the left. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna go destinations and ports. So we want to look at doors and windows on how our system sends information, right? So in this one, it's still gonna give you the IP addresses. It also gonna give you the min and max value for the rate, for the communication, the burst rate, right? Start. So you can also filter out by putting things in here, right? So what we want to do is we want to look at the information. Now on the display filter, we want to also look at TCP port 80 and UDP port 80. So in this area, you're going to go ahead and paste in your filter criteria. You can type it in, and in Kali, you can copy and paste it. So we want to put in specifically looking for this port. Now, if you're looking for DNS, you want to put in UDP port 53, right? This is allowing us to look for TCP port 80 or, right? Or when you see a double pipe like this, that's an OR port 80. And in an OR rule, it's going to look for this or this, right? In an AND, it has to be together, both of them. Where OR, it's either one is true, then it's going to give you the filter. So if it's green, then that means that it's accepted. So if you you have a syntax error, it shows red, you need to check it. And then you can click apply, right? And it's going to give you specifically port 80. Now, under this, you would see there's TCP port 80, TCP port 80, TCP port 80, right? Now, what you can also do is you can also go back to your entire capture, and you can also filter out that way. You can also put in this information, right, instead of using it here. So I'm going to show you that. So in the display apply filter, you can also paste it here. And that's going to give you all the options with the packets that are specifically port 80. And you can look at the IP address, the source and destination. So the green ones, as you see, right, that is because they color code it. That's typically what you see with like HTTP SYN and acknowledgement, where you see the black one. Sometimes that could be erroneous or it's having issues, right? So what you see there, it's not connecting, or it's still pending, right? It's not fulfilling. So what you see is you see different. So in this sense, we're looking for HTTP, so that's the majority you're going to see as green. So the IP address, you can look at the column for source and destination there. Now, in a realistic sense, when you're filtering out services, you have to record all the IP addresses, right? To look for anomalies. I know it can be a lot with a lot of system talking, right? But in the sense where I want to show you in a smaller scale, you can see. So you can do it this way. You can go through the analysis portion. Now, if you go through the statistic, right, like what we said before, and then what did we look at for? IPv4 statistic. If you look through here and you go look for the, destination import, it actually gives you the percent, and that's closer to what you see. So if we filter out this way, right, you are going to see only, right, if you're looking at port 80, only, for me, only this one shows 100%. I don't want the other ports up here. So if you're looking at 100% up here, then you're looking at the wrong port number. You want to go down to where it says port 80 down here, right? And I would see there are instances where I have 36 and 57 counts of packets, right? That is 100%. And then also down here for these IP addresses. So I'm looking at this IP address, right? There's communication back and forth with 57 packets for me at 100%. This IP address at port 80, right? So don't record the stuff up here because the stuff up here indicates these ports. You want to go to the port 80 or under the IP addresses that's shown here and record that information. Okay? So that's how I'm able to see the IP addresses used at 100% for port 80. Look it down here. This IP, this IP, and this IP for me, right? Similar to yours. So it should be on the bottom if you filter it out right here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look for the DNS statistic. So go to statistic and then select DNS. And typically you can do a general query or you can look for query and response. That means ask and reply, right? So I'm going to go ahead. Wait, let me go back. We're gonna do a general first. And the general is going to be everything, including the query and response. So you do see that there's like 15 query and 15 response. And so with that, you get 50% for each. And the query type, you see the IPv4, which is record A. There's 14 packets that contain that. And then the quadruple A, which is IPv6, there's 12 packets containing that, right? There are query type for HTTPS, for me, for my system, and then the payload size information. So you see the response is going to also, right, it's going to tell you the answer type because in order to connect to a domain, it needs to take the IP and correlate that to the URL. So you got the public IPv4 and IPv6, and then also HTTPS, right? Sometimes you also have CNAME, which relates to host name that's pertaining to the server. So you do see some percentage in that for the DNS, right? These are records that is requested and replied. So for the ADNS query, for me, I would look at for the query, go to the query type right here. I have 14 packets and yours is somewhat similar, right? It might not be exact. And then the percentage, I see that I'm at 46.67%. Then the quadruple A, which is for IP version 6 record, and I'm at 40%. So it's slightly under 50% for the burst rate. Then my total count for payload, right? So if you select the general, it's going to give you a lot of the details information about your DNS. My payload size, right? Yours might be different, like I said. So the total count for this is 30 packets, and I average about 53.87. So it varies from system to another, and when you capture how many, requests and response and pertaining to the payload. Now, if you want to know more, you can also scroll down. It shows you about a query name, second and third level, etc. Right? The number of error that I received. This relates to your black, right? Remember earlier you saw some black color coded. Now, the min and the max, you can look at the columns. So for mine, it's 28 and the max is 111, right? That shows there. That's pretty easy. So we want to examine the payload size. That's what we talked about in the lecture today, right? Look at your packets information. Now we can close the DNS. We're going to look at endpoints, right? You've seen this before. So, oh, no, I go to statistic and we want to go to endpoints. Now, endpoints is pertaining to systems that are connecting as an endpoint, right? That could be desktop, that could also be an appliance or a system. Now we're going to look at the service that's related to TCP. TCP require four-way handshake like acknowledgement, agree to exchange, confirm, and end, right? So we want to look at how many systems that actually use TCP for communication. So TCP I show here, right? I have a total of, it does the count up here. So see your IP addresses and we want to be able to count that up. But typically, if you look, right, there's only one system, me, my virtual machine, one IP address. There's 2, 3, and 4. So there's a total of 4. If you look at the tab, that's a miscount. It's basically conversations that your system generates, right? Uh, Now the packets, so if you look at if that's the same IP address, we want to be able to sum this up. So we count 1 here, 2, and 3, and 4. There's 4 specific systems, right? Look at the distinguished IP address. And then we want to see which system would generate the most packets. So look at the packet count, right? The highest packet count is this one. That's through port 80, right? You see 113. Second highest is, that's an external IP. That's coming back from HTTP, right? 76 and 113 packets. But then if we compare that to byte size or your payload, right? That does not necessarily show that it is higher in payload. So the correlation now changes, right? We can't say that the most packets really generate combined, maybe if we added up the total size of all the communication, but in the smaller with a different port, not using port 80, but another port, if you look, right, there's higher payload size, right, with other ports out of port 80, not port 80, right, with other systems, which is our virtual machine. And then you can scroll right. It gives you like the percentage, bytes information. Now we want to save this capture. So when you click close, and if you click close the app, it asks you, do you want to save? We're going to click save. And it's going to default into your home Kali directory, which is your user account, right? And we can call this lab 8. And you always are going to use pcap type of file. Typically, your sniffer uses capture file system. So or format, I should say, pcap ng. Okay, so that takes care of A. Now back to the terminal here. I open the terminal and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a T-Shark, which is equivalent to what you see with Wireshark, right? T-Shark is command line based. It doesn't have the graphical user interface like what you see. I'm going to generate a file called packets.json. Remember earlier we can select a JSON file in Wireshark. We can do the same thing with a lot of the other sniffer. So you want to say interface Ethernet adapter. So if you're using a specific adapter, you want to specify that here. And we want to port that out as a JSON file. So just like Wireshark, we're going to run it. And we want to generate traffic now. So you can open up your Firefox just like before. We're going to do HTTP website. And then click on our first result. We want to generate a little bit more traffic. So refresh it a couple of times. So let it capture. Right? In a regular environment, you want to run the capture and you have system communication. So it will capture everything that's going on in the background. Okay. Now wait a few minutes. See, bye, good night. Good night. So, good night. So as you have traffic, you're gonna see the count going up, right? That makes sense. Before, if you don't have traffic, it's nothing. So coming back here, I can just reopen and refresh, right? To kind of generate some traffic so you can see something. Now, after a few minutes, we can cancel the process by typing in Control and C to stop the capture. Then what you're going to do is you are going to download, obtain the key. ELK, because it is integrated as an API, you need to, or as an application, you need to be able to have GPP key access for it. So you need to run this entire command as one for step 26. So Control C here, right, to stop my capture. And then I'm going to, oops, let me close this. I'm going to run this command to have my keys for my app. Put in your Kali password. Then what we're going to do is we are going to create a file called source.list. And that's going to allow us to use the keyring that we have obtained. So we're going to use echo command to do that. This is required to use ELK. And you can go through their documentation and web resources. I have to massage this a little bit when I wrote this. So it's going to run fine there. It's going to create that file for you. After this, we want to push update. Typically, I make you guys run update at the beginning, right? But because we have installed new things, so for Linux, recommendation is that you should updates throughout or at the beginning or somewhere in between. I should just type it. And that's going to take a few minutes to come down. Then after we have updates, then we can install Elasticsearch is the E of the ELK framework. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to install Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is ideal for log analysis as a first step. So basically it allows you to search through the logs, right? It's a mechanism for search, but it works really well with log file. So once we install the application, then you are going to use Nano, which is your text editor, to edit the YML file, right? Think of it like a file that it uses for the search mechanism. And what we want is we want to put in the local host because that's the system that we're using, right? The target system on the network. You can also put in IP address if you have that, like a remote IP, if you're connecting to a specific remote system, or the host name, which is in this case, the localhost interpret to the 127.0.0.1, which is a loopback address. Okay. So now after I install Elasticsearch, I'm going to do step 30, which is I'm going to create the YML file. or edit it actually. Okay, so this file exists. It comes down with the installation of the app. If you see the hashtag at the beginning, that's like a comment, right? So for the configuration, we want to look for the network.host, and we want to make sure that it is the IP address or the local host information. Okay. You can do Control W to search, and I want to search for the element network.host. And it's going to take me directly there. So I wanted to uncomment it, so remove the hashtag. And then you can change this IP address because it's default in the file as the class C, your home IP address, which is your router, right? You want to change that to localhost or the 127.0.0.1, but we're going to do localhost. So we need to remove the hashtag in front, and then we want to indicate localhost as one word. And how I found it, you can scroll down using the down arrow key, or you can do a Control W, press those together, and then type in network.host, and it's going to take you to that line. Now you can also modify the port information, right? But we're going to activate it. So here, if you want, you can also change your HTTP port. There's also content in the file template that you can modify. So Control X, yes, to copy, to save, and we want to save it as the same file. So press Enter. So Control X, right? Y and Enter for the next step. Then what we want to do is we are going to start the app by using system control, the app service, I should say. And you can just leave it like this and open another terminal to run the next command, because it might just be hanging like that. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to test the service by using the get command. Don't know. Let me see. So we're going to generate a get at that port, right? So this is what you see as an output, typically for JSON. It's going to give you like system name information, right? The cluster name, which is Elasticsearch, we installed and started it. The build is for Debian, so the application information, the version. So it gives you some content information. Take a screenshot of that. Now we can go back to our main terminal. It started the Elasticsearch, right? It gives us some details about the service. Then you're going to install Kibana. Now the UI for this, for Linux, like I did this for my Python networking class a while back. You have to install a specific desktop for Linux, and it doesn't for the default desktop that you see on Kali or Debian typically won't do. The desktop that it requires for Kibana for the UI is a little bit more resource intensive, so your virtual machine needs to have more RAM and more storage. So I just keep in mind, right? But you can do the web interface through your browser application. It does have a UI content that is made for specific desktop. You can go to their website and read up on So even if you start the service, it doesn't necessarily load the UI through the native application that you install. It's gonna port it through your browser. So you have to do two things. After you install Kibana, you are going to enable it and you are going to start it. So Kibana is an element in the analysis for visualization, for graphing, for looking at trend, right? So the whole point in using Elasticsearch is taking the log, converting it to a specific file so the application can take that and interpret it for you and graph it for you in the second element, which is Kibana, right? So these two typically go hand in hand. Now, step 36, I'm going to let you know that this is a default account that might create the error at the end. Typically, you need to create an account for ELK, for Kibana specifically. Like you have to go in, register for an account with an email, and then you need to log into it to be able to visualize your file. And that's ideal, right? But this is a way that we can create a configuration file for that account. So keep in mind that this is like a generic admin account information. It might not fully work as a user account, etc., if that has been changed, right? So you need to look at their documentation to see if the admin account is the same, if there is an admin account, but you would need to have a user account to access the dashboard. Okay, so I already had installed Kibana. Next, I'm going to enable and start it. It's two different things. Enable allows you to enable the service. Start is to activate the actual service, to run it. You can enable without. So it tells me here, right, that it enabled the service. And it allows you to have multiple user. Then we are going to start. We're going to run the service. Now, some application you just enable and start is the same, right? Some of them are not. So we're going to start Kibana. Now we're going to do a configuration file. Like I said, this pertains to specific user. And in this case, we are going to look at the application admin user, and that can change time to time. So the process after installation is to put in, to turn it on, right, and run it. And then we are going to make a password for the admin account, right? So we are going to do Callie and then Callie. So now it created that profile into the configuration file. So it stores that password information that you just put in. Now we're going to edit the web side of this particular application because it's a web app. So we're going to modify the configuration file for the web portion of it. So once you hear, let me close this. You are going to go down and look for your domain information, right? If it's commented out, I think if you watched the video already, right, you have to uncomment it like what you've done in the last section. So for 37, I would need to look for my server and the listen port 80. So you can use your arrow key to scroll down, right? Or you can do Control W and search for server. And it's going to take you to that section. If it's in white, that means that it's already active, right? And so we are going to look for server name right? Whatever, if it says your domain or whatever, you need to change that to localhost. Let me see if it's still. Listen at port 80. Let me double check this. Location. I think they removed the proxy pass, right? On the new package. Yeah. So it defaults to 80. Listing port. Let me check something real quick. No, maybe it might not load this. Give me a second. Yeah, I don't think there's much that you need to configure there because I think then on the newer app, they already have that configured to the default. So coming back here, right? As far as this part right here, if you don't modify anything under your server name, it's going to default to the local host, which is what you see here. You see? It's taking you to the app home, right? That's what we want, is a way to interface with the app that we install through the browser. And then you can do add integration and then be able to create your account and you can log in or use your Kibana is a separate component, but see? So I think for this part, right, they removed this section. So you don't need to put in your domain. In the previous version, you have to edit this as a local host, but it's defaulted here. We already specified that there. So I don't think you need to edit much for this part. But if you have a specific domain information, you need to modify this part. Okay? Like the IP address or your domain name. And also the server name. Now, virtual host configuration, for example, you can move that to a different file under sites available, enable and enable it. So if you want, you can also change this, right, for the virtual server. So if you want to modify this as instructed, you can remove this, right? Like if you watch my video, I think I have the older section. So you can remove all the hashtags here, but this pertaining to your virtual server, which is, and then you can say localhost. And then after that will just be, Control C. After that will just be like remove for the root var, but that will be This will be whichever domain information, so I'm just gonna put localhost here. But typically you will put in your domain name here, like example.com, like what you see. Yeah, so the location, you don't have any kind of proxy pass anymore, right? You can also remove. So index file is going to allow you to load the landing page. Okay, so we have all the curly brace that we need. Open and close, Control X, yes, enter. I think this they changed from the previous version. Okay, so let's see. We're gonna enable the configuration now. And then we're gonna check and NGINX is for web server, right? Because it is a web application that we're using, you have to. And it tells me that I tested successfully. Okay. So that works. Now you wanted to see the interface, you're going to, so it's gonna run it as by default port 5601. So you can, if you want command line only, Firefox, right? And then put in HTTP and the URL, localhost, and the port 5601. Or you can open and put in the URL. So it's gonna give me the landing page here. You can add integration. You can explore on my own this options, right? It's gonna bring you, so you are locally hosting this. You can do enterprise search, experience with API. You can do analytics. This is what we talked about because we already have the T-Shark file. So you would go here. But like I said before, right, you need to, so you can add in, they have like machine learning level. You can go to dashboards, right? You can make a new dashboard. We can upload the file that we created earlier, right? So you can upload a JSON file or a CSV file or a log file that you want, right? I don't think I talked about this in the prior video. You can add sample data. So this allows you to visualize your data. This is a very cool tool. Like not a lot of people are an expert in this that I know, but if you are, that's really good for you. You can also set up alerts, right? As you can see on the stack management style. So you can add different things to your, you can add integration, you can set up different things like endpoint security. So it has a lot of components that we talked about today and like things that you can pull in for cloud, right? Akamai is very cool with logs analysis. So it works well with Elasticsearch. That's an element that you can also bring in. So how did I get here? I just clicked the dashboard option. So I just said explore on my own, right? Once I get to the UI, and then you can also choose like different tool option here. And then you can add elements to it by clicking adding integrations. Also hosts like systems. You can also put in alerts. and you need additional permissions. So I think some of the elements you probably have to buy, right? Developers don't always work for free, but anyways, so it doesn't have like a lot of, so it says fail retrieve detection engine privileges. That just means that the user account that I'm using don't have that privilege, right? I think on the app, you have to buy components to give you additional access. But you do have, like, if you want to play with this, right, this is enough for you to kind of dive a little deeper. Okay, so we can take screen capture showing that it works. If you want to import like the files that you made, we are going to use a decorator. Basically, it's like kind of like a wildcard, but it's going to take the JSON file that you generated and dump it in. This is a way, but you can also use the interface to upload, right? You saw earlier that you can access the dashboard and you can upload a file this way. This is an easiest way. But if you only have the terminal as an interface, you can do a curl command this way. And it might dump out an error because of authentication. So if you are not logged in, it's going to throw an error. But I did check there, right? So it's telling me the status. Oh, it does have some failed information, but it did pull the packet information, right? I captured some packets earlier and it parsed it. This is kind of hard to read in a terminal sense, but this is how you can pull in the data that you had. And we store that on home directory, so it's able to put that in. And I put the link there for you, and this changes time to time. So make sure you check their documentation. They give you like how to edit the YAML file. And then let's start the Kibana service. So we have the Elasticsearch. I'm going to open another terminal for this. It didn't like Control V. That. Okay, so it's actively running. Everything works, right? Compared to before. And then now what you want is once you start the Kibana service, you want to reload your interface. So we can go open Firefox again. So you're still gonna get this, but now you should be able to have like the components to visualize with the K for Kibana. I think that also is there before, but you need to activate that. Let's move this. You can add integrations, and then you can go through and you can add the components that you need. So if we want to look at the DNS, right? Or if you work with database, etc. And so this is ELK. I have, if you watch all my videos from the prior classes, many struggle with this particular framework because the changes and the fixes that came with it. But for this particular class, I want to make sure you are introduced to it so you can play with it on your virtual machine so you can learn how to use it and use it for your job. Okay. But this is a way that you can measure, you can analyze your data as an analyst, you can integrate, and it's beautiful. Okay. So now you know. And once you're there, take a screenshot and you shut down and you finish your lab. So put down what you've learned today. We learned how to capture, right, network traffic using T-Shark and Wireshark. We learned how to analyze a little bit of the traffic and filter the display and look at the packet information. We learn how to set up ELK, Elasticsearch, and Kibana in Linux, and to be able to interface with it through the browser as a web app, to be able to look at integrations for analysis. And that's all she wrote.